The work I have done, which I call the Golden Attache Case, and there are already 2 volumes in the internet. I'm working on the 3rd one right now.
We will put the link to the
You can put the
site
link, yeah.
Under the video
Yes,
in the description,
right.
yeah?
And you can take images from the first 2 volumes, and depending on when you go online with this, maybe you can already pick up from the 3rd one. This is because I think it will take me 1 or 2 weeks to finish the 3rd volume, and I will see when that's finished, or when I get close to finish it. I personally think I need a 4th volume, and but if it fits in the 3rd volume, why not? But I don't want to rush it, because the way this photo series is, it's really a step-by-step and many little details that I photographed in order to show that process and to be able to give an impression of the atmosphere that this project carries. No? Mm-hmm. So I can say, I mean, to make it a little bit more concrete, I can say this: how did I get to creating this thing? No? One thing was, very trivial in a way. You know that when you walk around, you always find something that is interest. If it's a chair, or if it's somebody else left something, you can use this like for the kitchen or whatever. Not going on a flea market, just what lies around that the people throw away. In my case, somebody threw away this attaché, this businessman's attaché case. It's right there in front of my door, and was not in the garbage. It was standing next to it. So I look at it. It looks like new. The only thing is it had some spot on it. Whatever that spot was, some grease or some, I have no idea. But that was in perfect condition. I don't need this. But I couldn't pass with it. I couldn't leave it there. So I took it home. You know, it's like, I don't know, 10 meters in front of my door. And it sits there. And I have no purpose for it. I was thinking of 2 things. One thing is, which is absolutely today useless to use this, is to use it like a portfolio or some kind of image carrying case to when you introduce yourself. I don't introduce myself that way. I introduce myself through the internet. So I don't need a fancy case to show my photographs. I'm not a businessman or insurance salesman or something like that. I don't need this case either. The next day I was thinking, well, it might be useful to put cameras into it, because it fits easily into the airplane top or under the seat. But then I thought, if I fill this with cameras, it gets so heavy that if they check the weight, it will be more than what is allowed to take on. So forget it. No practical use. It stays there in the kitchen, and I keep on looking, and somehow, I can't pin this down to one thing, that somehow I was working, and I'm always involved in this kind of what you call, I don't know if you call this memorial culture or immemorial. Mm-hmm. I've done this with other photographs. With the Redback, I have done an exhibition in 2008 where I said the Redback commemorates 70 years of the November pogrom. No? Kristallnacht under quotation mark or bracket. And I used the Redback as a medium. I photographed it in Mauthausen, I photographed it in Berlin at the memorial monument by the American architect, and I photographed it in the Neusiedlersee. No? Beautiful exhibition, beautiful photography, and so this kind of memorial thing is part of my life. I mean, because I'm coming from a family that were refugees, many of our people got killed. I don't even know the names of them. There are no documentations, because many of the people, like everybody else in Vienna, was living in Eastern Europe, so that's it, bang, gone. And so here's this case. I decided to use this attache case to build, almost if you want to say childlike, but not something concrete, like like children have sometimes a house and then they play with cars and with animals and all that, but abstract, using abstract forms. And so I started out by buying in an art supply shop a big block of clay. That's probably about 10 kilos or something now. Big block. But I bought the clay that is, since I'm not a ceramic artist and I'm not a pottery artist, and I was not going to use it that way, I bought the one which they sell for children. A little softer so that children can handle it. I mean, then they will make shapes and then maybe burn it and paint on it. I was only interested in the material of clay, the earth, so to speak. And I started out with that. And I had already done some work with acrylic colors. And I'm not a painter, but I use the colors as a material, as an object, if you want to say. No? And I've done images with acrylic colors. And that's like a whole different story because, again, I made some, which as you look at it, you might call it a painting, but I treat it as a sculpture. And I photograph it in different ways, the details. And what happened, of course, with this Golden Attache Case, of course, I could go and photograph every stage, just the whole case, which is a nice image. But it will never show you what's in the fine details, because you can never, if you want to say, you can never zoom in with the eye, or even you can't even zoom in with the mind to see what you see when you use a macro lens. So of course I took some photographs, a total thing, and I haven't published that. At the end, maybe I published a total thing, so people say, oh, all these hundreds of little images come from this and this and that. I used a 100 macro lens to be able to really go in and show things that happen. Sometimes you can say they happen as you work with it, because some things you consciously create, but mostly I'm dealing with also the acrylic color. I use it as, it was a stiff liquid. It was not like a soft, easy. So I could just squeeze it on and see what happens, Then sometimes I would spread it, etc. But there are many elements, you can say that, where there's some character in the material from not being treated as painting or from not being treated as a sculptural shape, but just because my hands touch the materials. And I photographed that. And I photographed that how, when the acrylic color gets dry, how it cracks. Of course, when you look at it from here, you see that crack, but that crack doesn't touch it the same way than when you go in and you photograph only a little segment of it, and then you blow it up. I mean, when I say blow it up, I see it about this size in the computer. If you blow it up exhibition style, it has an unbelievable power. There's so much energy in this. So I went layer by layer. I create, if you want to say, an abstract visual landscape, if you want to say. I create layer by layer, photographing every step. And eventually I close that attache case, but because it's stuffed with material, and I already have created the normal locks dysfunctional by putting materials around it. I did not want it be locked normally. I had to literally step on it or kneel on it to keep it closed. And then I used wires, 2 or 3 different wires, like a package, to keep it solid. And then, to some extent, what I did interior-wise, I also did exterior-wise. Because the gold initially in the interior are either small elements, or just a little bit spread on the surface. Now the whole case is golden, but not painted like this. Have it again. Squeeze the acrylic color on it, and then use a fork or a spoon. No art tools, but like household tools, and spread the color. So it gets a very uneven texture. And the handle is red, and I show, since you can see there's a crack in it's not completely closed, because the way the material is in there, it's black already inside, but I then added black color as if the earth, and like I said, what the black stands for. I mean, being European, I think of black earth. Another country, you have to probably say brown or red or whatever. Being from here, the most, if you want to say, fertile earth, because consider black earth. It's a healthy sign if we have black earth. So I'm treating the black as being symbolic for the earth and the fertility, but also I treat it as being death. The gold I treat as, and I have written that down for the publication in the internet. The gold is both. The gold that was literally stolen from people, and down to the teeth, golden teeth, but also the gold is in terms of the culture and the soul that was stolen by killing millions of people on an industrial scale. And it shows, and also the gold sort of symbolizes the greed of those people who stole the material and the life of the people. At the same time, the gold is symbolic also for kind of a survival of that culture, and it continues the culture of the people who have been killed through people who either are the relatives or people who simply grow in the spirit of that culture. Leaves the red, so the red is everything, you know what red stands for, but you can say the red is there, it's blood in many ways, anywhere from giving life to killing, and also of course the red as a very powerful color, fire, revolution, so many meanings, positive and negative meanings. These are the three main colors. So they are visible in the end on the outside, mostly gold, a red handle, and in the crack is the black. So here is a situation that I mentioned to you before, where through photography, through seeing, through thinking, I'm going many times beyond photography. But I'm always a photographer. The brain is sort of, if you want to see, geared photographically. I created an object, step by step, that had nothing to do with photography itself. But it has to do with my life, it has to do with my thinking, it has to do with my friends, my family, everything. It has to do with the society I live in. And, but I photographed every step. And while I photograph, I experience what I'm doing, that I would not experience the same way if I keep the camera completely out of it. Because it would actually make no sense if I would do the same thing, close the case, if there's no photo. The most vital thing of developing this whole thing is gone. It's not visible.
So the camera and the lens is more or less something organic for you.
Organic.
It's part of your process of visualizing life, of visualizing also death. It's more than an instrument, it's really a part of you.
It's, I don't know, it's, sometimes it's maybe trivial, but still, if you look at the life of athletes, we're like people who live with football or soccer, where they say they can't live without that ball, because their whole ability, their whole thinking goes on how to handle this ball, how to score, or how to defend. Then, of course, comes the business aspect, how to make the most out of your ability that you have on handling this ball, that it's very difficult for many of these athletes to switch off. There's a ball, they want to kick it, that kind of thing, So, and you can see, if you look at the history of the sport, if initially you could see it was just for people to play their way out of poverty. You remember the beginning soccer, and as we know it in Europe, and you could apply this to basketball or baseball, etc. in the United States, and football there. It's many times poor people who, through this athletic ability, get out of poverty and become sometimes very rich. And very few people can make that switch, that they get education in the process in order to either do something beyond the sport or to function in a management position in the sport. I mean, the typical case we know here from Vienna, it was always said when a soccer player is finished, meaning at mid-30, if he's lucky, he either had a gasoline station to make a living, a tobacco store, or maybe a bar and a restaurant to have a life for another 30, 40 years. But they didn't have any knowledge to do anything bigger than that. And also they didn't earn money to do something bigger than that. And they didn't have the education to do anything. Today it's quite common that people consciously get the education to be able to do something beyond the immediate sport. So in case of photography, for me, from the very beginning, photography was not just a matter of learning a trade or I wanted to learn something that I enjoyed, right? So I started to enjoy photography very quickly. I mentioned to you before, like first I did the retouching where we had to satisfy the teachers. But the moment we started photographing, it became a dialogue between us students and of course with the teachers. But very quickly, it simply became part of my life. And I don't know if I've mentioned to you this before, it's a few years before Corona. I take a walk downtown in the first district, and I walk around the corner, and one guy who was before a gallery owner, he knows my work, but he was in a different area involved, he didn't show photography. And he asked me that simple question, are you still photographing? And I wanted to tell him, this is like breathing, it's like eating, it's like everything. And I answered him with a very simple thing saying, are you still breathing? And he didn't answer that, but then we'll think, well, maybe I offended him. But we talked then about the art scene in Vienna, etc., etc. The key point is, I know plenty of photographers, when in our case here in Vienna, when they reach the retirement age, some of them literally completely stop photography. They sell their gear and they don't touch photography. It's like, it doesn't matter if they would have been a plumber or if they would have been a craftsman of anything, retirement, goodbye. I have enough money to enjoy my retired life. I don't go and work, in my job. On the other hand, I know other people here, but I know people in the States and I know people in Japan. They work till the last day. Not because they need money, but that's their life. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Japanese photographer Domon Ken. Have you heard of him?
No.
He originally, I think, was a photojournalist. Did some very interesting, very striking, if you want to say, social documentary, etc. After the war, he was still doing, it was during the war, before the war, during the war, after the war, meaning World War II. He was one of the well-known photojournalists in Japan. And I can't tell you when, but somehow he had a stroke or something like that. Anyway, he was wheelchair bound. He couldn't walk by himself, but he still was, his brain was okay, his eyes was okay. He started photographing Buddhist situations like temples and the forests and everything across Japan. I saw one of the exhibitions, fun. But he was in the wheelchair. But he had all these people helping him because yes, they could drive to a certain point, but eventually they had to roll him or carry him. And he was photographing large format. So you imagine the assistance you need for large format. You need at least 2 people. Tripod, camera, films, maybe 3 people. Then carrying him with that wheelchair. But he had that spirit. He had that strength to do that. He was famous enough with his journalistic work. And if you want to say he could have had a simple life, just retired. Or maybe just publishing books and get a little money, or maybe lecture. He deeply went into large format photography in relationship to Buddhism. So when you see a guy like that, why should you stop photographing if you love that? But people, it depends on the society. Many times people have this thing, the moment you reach a certain age, you're supposed to stop doing what you're doing and just enjoy life if you have the money for it. If you don't have the money for it, my joke is always, near where I live, there is a little pond, which was initially done, to get the clay out of it. I did not know, recently somebody told me, this pond is 80 meters deep. That's how deep down they went into the earth to get the clay out to make bricks, because the 10th district where I live was famous for Wienerberger is based on that history now. And there were so many Czech people came to work there as cheap labor to do this. And so I'm kind of making a joke. I said, what do you want? Should I go and sit down and go fishing there? Because there's always some people sitting there fishing. Because it became, you can't go swimming anymore. And it was developed in such a way that it is a biotope, that it is perfectly natural, everything being taken care of, etc. So you have people there every day fishing. They're equipped. You can. This is not cheap, the equipment for. And I don't know how many fish they catch, but I think you can catch probably enough fish. Maybe you manage at least one meal a day. But they're doing it, I think, for enjoyment. They enjoy fishing. I don't think it's a necessity, because if they were very poor to depend on the fish to eat, they couldn't afford that gear, and that is expensive. You look at the stuff, this expensive stuff they're having. Anyway, that's, it never was in my mind that I would stop photography.
But I think it also depends on your initial attitude towards photography. I know people who worked professional as photographers and who during their life really lost the bite to take photographs, because they didn't take the photographs they wanted, they took the photographs they had to take and to please their clients.
Yes.
And that's terrible if you can't take the photographs you like for yourself, or will stand behind it when you see it, but just take photographs for making a living and for pleasing others. Because this is really killing your creativity, and this is also killing your photographic eye. Because you are no more looking at the others as a photographer, but in fact you are just a mirror for their own vanity.
Yeah.
And I think these are the people who, when they are 60 or 65, smash the camera and go fishing to the bricks pond. But if photography is for you a way to build up a relation to the world around you, then you never will stop.
It's just, how can I say, I sometimes, especially in Japan, because I was living very intensively with photography, and doing it, but also being surrounded by photography, because it's Japan in general, but of course also Tokyo with the camera industry and the magazines and everything. You constantly see people running around with cameras, not tourists, photographers, young photographers, because they study. Some photographers who are, if you want to say professional artists or whatever, you see them all the time with cameras, you know. So it was very intensive to live in this environment. So I've forgotten at least once or twice a song, I put in kind of a sabbatical. I'd photographed so much, I stopped consciously photographing. Still was involved with all the projects that I was doing, but I on purpose did not photograph to make myself hungry. And what I did when I sort of really got hungry and I started already dreaming photographs. I had one dream where it was a combination of a situation in London with a situation of where I was living. It's almost like the train left the building that was London, that was Japan, passed by buildings in London. Anyway, it was kind of like a psychedelic thing almost, how the different images would come together. And then somebody said to me, oh, maybe you should photograph. They knew I was getting hungry, you know. And so I did this as a training kind of thing, you know. And what I did, for example, really, this was still analog time, that when I sort of said, okay, I have to photograph, I would first of all run 1 or 2 rolls and do tests. Just get the feeling, you know. And I could see right away that I was in tune. It's like a musician, you know. You play a certain level, for whatever reason you stop. Well, you just have to practice again a little bit, then you maybe make a composition, and you realize if you're on your level, if you're higher, if you're lower, whatever. So I did the same thing with photography a couple of times. And but otherwise, I was so busy with everything with photography, then, but particularly in the 80s, with promoting those images to produce textiles and other applications. It got me into so many different areas. It got me meeting so many different people, mainly initially in Japan, then also over here in the United States. That in that case, for example, when I was going from meeting to meeting in New York, I didn't carry a camera with me. My focus was who I meet and how to talk to this person. I was basically like on a sales rep kind of mentality. And but I don't, how can I say, I don't feel this was in vain for me to do this, because the focus was always there. The discipline was there that I have in photography, also was in this marketing, in this sales kind of situation, and to decide which way to go and who to talk to and what else could be done, that it just sharpened my sense.
I think that's the important thing, that there are people who believe that looking through the viewfinder of a camera is narrowing your sight. But in fact, photography is broadening your sight of the whole world. I think if you start to take photographs, you learn so much, because when you're taking photographs of architecture, of course you start to begin to study a little bit about architecture, to learn about it. When you're photographing flowers or trees or forests, you learn so much about nature. Photography is a little bit like taking up a dictionary, and you start to search one word, but you hop from one expression to the next, and that's the thing with photography.
You see, I think what people say that the camera narrows you down, or your focus, if people think that way, or if people allow that to happen, that's the situation where you say the camera is taking the picture, not you.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing with lenses. You know, they're talking about normal lens being the 50mm lens being natural for what we see. You can endlessly argue that. Fact is, you know, the moment we had telelenses or we had super wide and fisheye, of course, if you allow the effect of the lens to take over your taking pictures, then you are not taking the pictures. It's the lens doing it. So it's a question of not only your quality, it's also a question of your attitude. What do you photograph with a tele and how? and what do you photograph with a wide angle or a super wide angle, and how. Where you can see, again, there's a harmony between the lens and yourself. One Japanese photographer, for example, told me, he says, I have 3 lenses, 20, 50 macro, and 200. That's those lenses fit my thinking. So he made this as a discipline, he just photographed with these 3 lenses, he didn't get any other lenses, and he did fantastic work, And the same thing is true for films, where people chose a certain film to suit them when they photograph, because they knew what they're gonna get. And I think what's happening, particularly now with the digital, initially we as the people who use the digital camera, we have no influence how the computer in the camera is processing the image. But if you have the education from the analog side, it's very easy to step in at the latest. I never manipulate the camera directly. There's so many different ways you can manipulate the camera, especially if it's a professional camera. I don't do this. I keep a standard image. I'd rather leave any kind of changing of the image in terms of contrast, in terms of exposure kind of thing in the computer. That's like the darkroom.
Look, it's the post-processing because therefore you have the raw format, because in raw you have such a lot of information you can change and manipulate and
it's
enhance.
Also, for me it is mentally the better way. That because if I start with each image to manipulate the camera, number one, you're going nuts. You want to be able to take a walk, or you want to be able to work with you sitting here. I'm not going to fumble around on the camera, So of course you can adjust the camera situation to situation, and one situation you photograph this way, that way. I think you're still better off you do this in the computer, because you have the time to absorb what you have been doing.
Okay.
And then you have as a security a standard image, and over the years you can take the same image and show it in different ways. It's even what I'm doing now with the Golden Attache Case, but even previous work, especially if it's abstract work, I will consciously change the color image to black and white for the book, in order to break a routine, or to have that effect to go from color into black and white as you leaf through the book. Somehow I apply also, in a way, a slideshow technique that jump from one image to another, the way it sort of either irritates you or it inspires you. Anyway, the break is useful. It's sometimes similar to music where you say you have a rhythm change. You're not always playing the same rhythm. Just change rhythm, come back to the original rhythm, etc., etc. So I do this with the photography, same way. How are we doing time-wise?
It's perfect. It is nearly some minutes above half an hour.
Perfect.
Let's say we finish this part here, and the next time I think we can continue in the direction we went today. That's the art of seeing. That's the question of how to see the world, and also maybe something about your experience with workshops, with different approach of people to seeing. I think it's. I had the impression today that this was really a very, very vivid and important session, because you were talking so much about your way of taking photographs, of seeing the world, and I'm really keen to hear the continuation the next time.
Okay, we're using what I mentioned to you before, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, share this video, share it worldwide, because it's a good occasion to make a great photographer known internationally. And don't forget your photographs. it's important to take the photographs wherever you are. You have this instrument, take it, make your shots, and yeah, you have to like it, your own photographs. See you.